Hi, I'm Janice Adams. Welcome to the show. What does it do to you when someone you love is ripped from the family, charged with a crime, wrongfully incarcerated, and after nearly 25 years, continues to serve a life sentence without the possibility of parole in the infamous Angola Prison, a national disgrace, despite evidence of his innocence and still protesting his innocence? Dr. Deborah G. Plant, author of the book, Dr. Deborah G. Plant, author of the book Of Greed and Glory in Pursuit of Freedom for All, is my guest today. Informed by her own personal experience, armed with her skills as a scholar, author, and literary critic, with a master's and doctor's, with a, informed by her own experience, armed with her own skills as a scholar, author, and literary critic, with a master's and doctorate in English. Yes, this story could happen to anyone and has too often happened to too many African American, Black, every man and every woman. Deborah Plant takes moments that can bring you to your knees and give us a book to bring us to our senses, to bring us to knowledge of what is being done to thousands of people in our name as American citizens. Deborah Plant, thank you for your book. Welcome to the show.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. That's very sobering. And I'm really pleased to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Pleased to have you. Grateful to have you. Let me ask you, who were you before your brother was taken, and who are you now?
Oh, jeez. Before my brother was taken, I think I can say, just someone who also had faith in the American system of justice to a certain extent. But as I talk about in the book, most of my understanding about the justice system was academic. And of course, you have some kind of influence from what you see that's televised and that kind of thing. And but then after my brother was incarcerated, even then I didn't quite get what that meant. It was over time when I was in a situation in such a way that I could actually begin to think about how I could get my brother back. Then I began to really see what we were all caught up in. I didn't really get it until that moment.
And who are you now?
I'm someone trying to get my brother back. Uh, I'm someone who really has begun to understand this whole enterprise of enslavement, its roots, how it continues in different forms today. Someone who wants to help America to become conscious of the fact that we have become unconscious about how we lose our freedom. Freedom is such a vital aspect of the American conscience. And at the same time, we're not really present to what it means when that liberty is compromised, is taken indiscriminately, when we have so little say about what happens in terms of our personal sovereignty. I want us to understand that to the core.
Tell us about your brother.
My brother, he's a beautiful person. He has a beautiful soul. And he's someone who grows in wisdom. He looks at his contribution to his situation. He reflects on that. He regrets what his responsibility has been in terms of being in the crosshairs of the so-called justice system. He's a loving person. When we go to see him, and I say we, my family, friends, sometimes, he's just so present to us. He's filled with gratitude. He's always, thank you for this, thank you for that. He takes nothing for granted. And he's been one of my biggest champions my whole life.
Is he older than you, younger than you?
It sounds like he's older, but he's actually younger. And that's the thing about Bobby is that he's 4 years younger than I am. But he has always treated me like his little sister. And I don't know how that happened, but he does. And he always looked out for me. Even while incarcerated, we write all the time. And he was, are you taking care of yourself? You have to be mindful about this and you need to be mindful about that. And another thing I can say about my brother is that I've written a few books and he is the only one in the family who's read all of them. Okay. And we can say what else he's going to do? He's sitting there, but not everybody is going to pick up a book. And not everybody is going to be able to sit with you when you come to visit them to have in-depth conversation with you about it. Like any critic. And I guess maybe critics run in the family because he gives me a critique of my work. So he's always learning and growing. And even now, he assists me with my work. He helps me with research. So he's this wonderful human being. And I would like to envision him free and see him free.
How old is he now?
He is 63.
63.
Yes.
Let me ask you this as well. I want you to come back to something you said, but your parents, were your parents alive when he was taken?
Only my dad. My mother died years ago, and my dad was alive. And my dad, as my brother, I think that's pointed out in the book, every step of the way, my dad was with him. But my dad, like my brother, like the whole family, we really had no clue about this system. And I say mainly my dad because I was away most of the time. By the time he was incarcerated, I was living somewhere, Tennessee or Nebraska or someplace. And but my dad was there, and when he was picked up and he was charged, the idea was that for on my brother's part was that he didn't want my dad to put himself in any kind of financial distress to pay bail. Bail was not paid. And when it came time for a
So he
lawyer,
was looking out for your dad the way he looks out, you said.
exactly, he didn't want my dad to use the house as collateral. He didn't want him to take out a second mortgage. He didn't want and quite possibly he didn't want my dad to lose the house. And so, yeah, he was looking out for my dad. And also, he really thought that justice would be served, that what he did do, he would be found guilty of. What he didn't do, he wouldn't be made guilty of what he didn't do. This was never something that crossed his mind. And he was assigned a public defender, but again, in terms of a private attorney, that takes money as well. And he, like I said, had faith in the system and also faith in this public defender until he saw that his faith and trust was not well placed.
You've said a couple of times what he did do. What
Yes.
does he say first of all, what was he accused of doing and then actually charged with,
Right.
committed for, etc.? And then what does he say he did?
He was accused of battery, simple battery, aggravated battery, kidnapping, simple rape, and aggravated rape. What he was guilty of, as he stated himself, was battery. He got into an altercation with his former fiance and physically abused her. And this was the beginning of this nightmare. And so he never once denied what he did do. What he did do was commit domestic violence. He put his hands on his fiance. So
What happened to her as a result?
what happened to her?
Yeah, as a
I
result.
as a as a result, from what I know, as I said, I wasn't there. As a result, I think that she must have probably gotten some kind of medical care for the abuse. I don't know the extent of it, but I understand it was extensive. And that's what I believe happened. He said, yes, he did that. But kidnapping and rape, he did not commit. He was presented with what they call a plea deal from the prosecution, right? The prosecutor says, if you plead guilty to battery and simple rape, I'll let you get off with 25 years. And my brother says, rape? I didn't rape anyone. And the deal was take that and the 25 years, or I'll also charge you with aggravated battery. I'll charge you with kidnapping and aggravated rape. And the aggravated rape is the charge that carries the life sentence without the possibility of parole. So take this 25 years, take that deal, or I would charge you with all of this and I'll send you away forever. Again, my brother is, I've got witness, a witness. I know I didn't do this. And in addition to that, when they went to trial, the state's own doctor examined the young woman and his report, and it's in the trial transcription and all of that. In his report, he says not only did he not find any evidence of rape, he found no evidence that sex had occurred at all. This is from the examiner that the state hired. And in spite of that, he was still charged with aggravated rape and found guilty in spite of.
It's the first call that you got to tell you what was going on since you say you were away.
It's been so long ago, I don't know about a first call. What I'm more clear about is coming back home. And rather than, like I said, I was away, I would come back home periodically. When I would come home, one of the first people I would see would be Bobby, because I would go to his job and he'd get off and we go find a place and we'd sit and laugh and talk until we remembered we were supposed to be someplace else a while ago. And this was our thing. And if we didn't do that, he'll say, come on to the apartment or the house and I'm going to cook you some red beans and rice, or I got some gumbo waiting for you, or whatever. And so what changed was coming home and not picking him up and going to a restaurant or going to the house or apartment. I had to go to East Baton Rouge Parish Prison and see him behind bars in this orange jumpsuit. This is when things change. This is when everything is just, my whole life is altered.
When we come back, more with our guest, Deborah Plant. She's the author of the book of Greed and Glory in Pursuit of Freedom for All. More here on the Janice Adams Show after the break. Thank you, Deborah.
Oh, you're welcome.
Ready to come back?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
3, 2. Hi, I'm Janice Adams. Welcome back. We're here with my guest, Deborah G. Plant. She is the author of Greed and Glory in Pursuit of Freedom for All. And in the last episode, she was introducing us to her story that brings her to writing this book and the case of her brother's incarceration. Deborah, as just picking up on that thought about his incarceration, I asked you, what did it do to you? What did it do to your dad?
My dad is just, he's whatever's present, he's just present to whatever's present. And he did what he could after my brother was found guilty in spite of evidence to the contrary, particularly in terms of the rape. Like I said, he didn't ever deny the battery, but it was the rape charge and conviction that would send him away to do a life sentence and hard labor at Angola without the possibility of parole. That was in relation to that charge. So what my dad does in relation to my brother is after that conviction, and they both saw that, okay, the justice system is not just. And my dad did engage a lawyer at that point in time to address this wrongful conviction, particularly in relation to the rape. And it was not heard, it was thrown out. Of course, you can appeal and appeal, and my dad did not have that kind of money. None of us did really. And so being resigned to the injustice, my dad was basically there to provide whatever my brother needed, including twice a week going to Angola Prison. And he did that until he died. He spent the rest of his life visiting my brother in prison the way I have and all of the others in the family.
Your book of Greed and Glory, you write about mass incarceration, and I'm going to ask you to read a section from that. But before you do, I'm struck by the length of the sentence, even the 25-year sentence for the battery. Do you know what the standard sentence is for that crime?
There is no standard. It's different in every state. As you, I'm sure will know, in some states, a life sentence without the possibility of parole is not, it, you wouldn't, that sentence wouldn't be handed down in relation to the kinds of charges that my brother was charged with. So there is no standard across states. There is no standard of how long a sentence will be in relation to any particular crime.
We usually think of life without the possibility of parole for someone who has committed an offense that otherwise would get the death penalty, and the death penalty is taken off the table, and this becomes the alternative. We also think of life without the possibility of parole, like in the case of the doctor who raped all of those athletes and a
Yes.
huge number of women, that he had just atrocities against those young women. We think of that, and there were just so many that by the time they dealt with the number of counts amounted to that kind of thing. We think in terms of a person being incarcerated for the crime that your brother committed, but not a life sentence for someone who does survive the attack. However, recognizing that something horrific did happen to that person, but that the person did survive the attack. Do you know what the difference is between, let's just go to the core of it. Do you know what the difference is between black and white? What the averages are between black people and white people who are charged with that kind of a crime?
What I can say is that of 2.5 million American citizens who are incarcerated, over 200,000 have life sentences. About half of that are African American. So in any case, whatever we're looking at in terms of mass incarceration, the majority are people of color, including African Americans and poor whites. All are poor, to a certain, virtually all are poor. So in it, whether we're looking at mass incarceration in general, or we're looking at those who are locked up in jails who are not even guilty of anything, because thousands are locked up every day who have not been charged with anything. Well, they've been charged, but they haven't been found guilty of anything. But you can be charged, but because you cannot post bail, you go to jail and you wait there until your case comes up for trial. Those are majority people of color, majority African American. whether we're talking about jail detention in general, or mass incarceration in general, or these extreme sentences, and particularly to be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, that's majority African American. At Angola, it's 75% African American.
Angola Prison, for those who don't know, is the most notorious prison in the United States. And for this conversation about mass incarceration and for your comment that he was not only sentenced to life imprisonment, but at hard labor, I think people need to understand the significance between that and the fact that Angola is a former plantation. So the pattern of Angola from its inception has been life incarceration, life enslavement, life not mattering for Black people. Deborah, would you read from that section from the book where you talk about mass incarceration? And this I won't include, but if you don't mind, why don't you read through James Baldwin's quote?
And give me your page.
The page that you gave me, page 24.
Oh, you want? Oh, we're looking at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you had crossed it out, and I thought, wow, why not?
Okay. So we're at page 24.
24 to 25.
Okay. And I think James. Oh, you want me to? Okay. Read through that. All right. Mass incarceration is a consequence. Systemic racism is a consequence. Economic marginalization and poverty are consequences. Sexism and misogyny are consequences of a network of oppressive systems deeply rooted in an ideology of greed and glory, of excess and tyrannical power. Monopoly capitalism, patriarchy, and quote unquote white supremacy number among the oppressive systems in which the quote unquote master slave dynamic operates. Elitism, signifying superiority, is their crowning feature. The taproot of this network of interconnected, mutually reinforcing systems of oppression is unconsciousness. Many Americans adopt the position that when the unthinking decisions were made that generated the racial and social disparities and structural economic gaps that we experience today, they weren't the ones who made them. Yet, as each successive generation unquestioningly
Could you start at that? Why don't you start at the top of that sentence again?
okay.
Yeah.
Yet, as each successive generation unquestioningly, I'm going to start this again. Is that okay? Yet,
Yes.
as
Just
each
relax.
as each successive generation unquestioningly, I can't get that word right now.
Unquestioningly, it is. You
Unquestioningly,
wrote it, Deborah.
I know. When I
No, I'm teasing. No, I'm teasing.
no, but the excerpts that I chose for you, I went over those. I didn't read the rest of it, but let me.
Tea time. Okay.
Yet, as each successive generation unquestioningly continues the practices established through custom or law and the attitudes that galvanize them, said practices become normalized as tradition and as our way of life. If nothing interrupts the habitual sociocultural loop, then we unconsciously repeat historical patterns. Even as we might consciously distance ourselves from the oppressive dogma of the past, unconsciously we continue it. As some are privileged and others are disparaged in accordance with the established dispensation of colonial American society. Encoded into laws and loopholes like the slavery clause are the prejudices, politics, and propaganda of the colonial so called master class. Far from being past history, the belief that Black people should be enslaved ad vitam for life informs the harsh and excessive sentencing of Black people and people of color in the modern era of mass incarceration. The life of my duly convicted brother and the consequent enthrallment of our family are a testament to James Baldwin's insight that we have yet to fully appreciate the nature and function of history. And I quote James here: history, as nearly no one seems to know, is not merely something to be read, and it does not refer merely or even principally to the past. On the contrary, the great force of history comes from the fact that we carry it within us or unconsciously controlled by it in many ways. And history is literally present in all that we do.
Michelle Wallace has famously written a book about the evils of mass incarceration, but here you are seeing it up close because it's not a phrase, it's your brother. And it, as well, though, this idea of mass incarceration, hard labor. So it's not even enough to just deprive you of your freedom. You even have to be exploited
Right.
for that. How did you come to seeing your brother as part of that syndrome rather than just simply my brother was wrongfully accused, wrongfully imprisoned? How did you make the link to mass incarceration, what that means,
Mhm.
and relating it to your brother?
When I could actually consider the idea of hiring a lawyer to look at my brother's case, I pondered the fact that money, it would take money, which is at bottom with the case of so many of us enthralled in the system. And as I thought about the money that it would take, I thought about our ancestors who would scrape and collect whatever monies they could to buy their loved ones out of enslavement. And I actually, it was very uncanny as I thought about getting enough money to get my brother back. I also felt myself as one of my own ancestors trying to buy one of us out of slavery. And when I looked at what we were up against, this whole business of life without the possibility of parole, that that was that's the crux of it. Because even before then, when my brother petitioned the parole board for clemency so that he could even have the possibility of parole, the parole board, in a few minutes flat, denied him that even to even consider his request. And they have reasons for that. But it was clear to me that I wasn't going to get my brother back through the parole board. The parole board was against him because, as far as they are concerned, he committed aggravated rape. And he would have to say that he did that. And then he would have to prove that he had done what needed to be done in order to even be considered for clemency so that he could have the possibility of parole. He would have to lie and say he had committed this act in order to have the possibility of one day maybe being seen as someone who could possibly be set free, emancipated, really. It was when they denied him that I said, we have to get a lawyer. We have to get a lawyer because he's never going to say he did that. He said, why will I lie and say I did something I didn't do and then leave here being branded a rapist? He said, I'm not a rapist. And he's not going to say he did submit to that kind of political, legal tyranny So that to what? To have the court say that they were right all along? He refuses. And I stand by him. And so in standing by him, what else can we do? And so when I look at the fact that it is such a harsh sentence, I compared that as I felt my own ancestors in me trying to reach back and pull someone out of slavery through purchase. I looked at the fact that what's different? Three of the main features of historical slavery are that it was it pertained to Africans and people of African descent, and it pertained to people of who were African descent, that they would be subjected to this slavery forever, durante vita, in perpetuity. That means for life. And then the third feature is, and their children will follow that same condition. They say of the mother, but it was also of the father. So is so here is this processes of historical enslaving of Black people. And I see the same processes with my brother, that not only is he taken up, yes, he committed one crime of battery, but he had not committed those other crimes, but he was charged with them. And this ambitious prosecutor made that charge or those charges stick. And so there he is facing a sentence of life at hard labor in Angola prison without the possibility of parole. You can't speak, you can't say anything. That's what no parole. It means a word, it means to speak, it means to express oneself. It's like we have you and you can't say anything about it. And this is also a feature of enslavement, is that you have no authority, not even in relation to yourself, let alone your children. And so the similarities are so exact. Even post 13th Amendment, when that clause in the 13th Amendment that says that slavery will be continued in relation to those who have been found guilty of some crime. And once this became part of the political landscape, then we see slavery morphing from what we call the peculiar institution as such into convict leasing, into sharecropping, tenant farming, and what have you. And with that convict leasing, this is also the processes of initiating that mass incarceration to re-enslave the labor, that those who were running this power structure, this is what they wanted to do, to regain control of the labor pool. And that basically meant to regain control of the lives of Black people. And so through convict leasing, it doesn't matter what you had done, or you could be innocent, but you will be charged with something. You could have committed some minor crime or infraction or misdemeanor, but it would be charged as a felony to put you in the situation of having your life force extracted from you for the benefit of the government, of corporations, and other business enterprises, including those plantations that continue to want our Black bodies to do the work of those plantations.
As we speak, you mentioned parole was to speak. And as we speak, you're in Florida, and state of Florida legislature has just proposed a law where you are now guilty of a crime if you even say something is racist
Yes,
and call someone a racist. It's okay to be a racist, but you
right.
cannot be called a racist. I'm reeling in my chair because
Yes,
I can't even figure out how to frame a question around something so ludicrous that is being allowed to, it's not being allowed to happen. It's being done. It's
yes,
being done without accountability, without any kind of thing. Deborah, I want to ask you about, obviously, what do we have to do? We've got to go beyond the easiness of the hashtags and the forwards, all of which help and are important, but that's not what needs to be done.
Mhm.
But I want to ask you something before we get to that. And it is personal. It is not just the person who is incarcerated who bears the stigma, it's the family.
Mhm.
What has it meant to you as a professional to have a brother who is incarcerated and to have people know that you have a brother that is incarcerated, who is incarcerated?
What about problem as American and as that demographic of Americans who have people enthralled in the system is that in some ways, because it's so overwhelming and it's, I don't know, it's unfathomable to a great extent. Just you say, you can't really move around in your chair because it's like, how do you form a question around absurdity? And so it's this huge absurdity that because we don't know what to do about it, we fall into what has become the normalization of it. And so I never really thought of, I never really thought about how I felt talking about my brother's imprisonment because it really didn't come up much. Sometimes if someone knows me well enough and we're talking about my siblings, and then it'll come up. But in terms of an academic setting, which is what I was in for most of my life, it never really came up, or I didn't create any kind of a forum for it to come up in. I mainly was very, like you said, it's a personal question. My personal life, I didn't really bring into the classroom. But given, and even when it comes to this book, I wasn't going to write this kind of book. My initial efforts at writing the book that I was writing that became this book was really largely academic. Events, names, dates, places, but not me. Now, my brother's story was going to figure into the book I was writing, really in a broad sense in relation to the phenomenon of mass incarceration, because what I was attempting to do and have done, but was doing in a more academic sense when I, at the outset of the manuscript, was to do this comparative analysis of historical slavery and the forms it takes in the contemporary society, mass incarceration being one of those forms. And so my brother's story would have been an example of that. But my editor and my agent said, we know you've written all of this other stuff, but your story is here with your brother. He's really central to everything that you're saying. I was like, really? And I could see that, but I was still wearing my academic hat. And so when I began to weigh what they were saying to me and to see how I could revise the manuscript and move in that direction, then the personal came into it because I can't really talk about my brother without talking about my relationship with my brother. And so how do I feel about that? I feel like it's the greatest blessing. It's like my brother and his situation has helped me to see this larger problem in America that I was really being academic about, but there is nothing academic about your life and how the liberty that you quote unquote take for granted to a certain extent, how it can be just snatched away from you. Or someone you love can be taken. And because the authority of the system is what it is, you wind up performing the same kind of, trying to perform the same kind of purchase of someone out of this slavery, out of this contemporary slavery that your ancestors did. And yeah, I'm fine with talking about it because we need to in this country really get to the root of our problems here And there are many roots, one taproot, as I suggest, but some of those roots have to do with the fact that we too often give lip service to liberty, freedom, equality, justice, democracy. We have to embody that. We have to live that. That's a personal thing as well as a collective thing. So my brother has allowed me to really see what it is that we need to do. And one of those main things we need to do is to look at the roots of this, how slavery, historical slavery, keeps showing up. And I say keep showing up, but it never went away. We just simply have reformulations of this same old problem of what I call this master slave mentality. We're still struggling with that. Some of us are aware of it, and most of us are not. And to move toward not only personal sovereignty and liberty, but also to complete the work of the 13th Amendment to to have slavery actually be ended in this country once and for all, everywhere. To, I would say, and my brother, I thank him for these ideas that have come to me. That is the American Revolution. The American Revolution did not end with the signing of the Treaty of Paris. The American Revolution had just become the idea. It's an idea in its infancy. And my idea is that part of revolution, that internal part called evolution, that's our responsibility to evolve those ideals, the ideals of freedom and justice and liberty for all. We have to embody that. We have to evolve it. We have to evolve it so that when we say America is the land of the free, that we have some integrity with that. Because right now, it's lip service, it's an obscure and an obfuscation of what's really going on. Whether we're talking about mass incarceration or we're talking about corporate enslavement of so-called the so-called American worker. This is they are all expressions of the same master slave mentality that was born on these slave plantations in colonial America.
In closing, would you read your brother's letter?
Yes. My brother writes, "Hey, little sister, I'm all right. Just sitting in this prison wasting time. I think a lot about what I could be doing if I was at home. All my days are being wasted, and I feel like I could be doing something with my life. I'm smart and I learn fast, but I have nothing to do here. Life is a drag. I wonder a lot, why am I here? I never raped nobody, but I'm still here. What is my purpose of living? I'm not helping anyone or doing anyone any good. I feel like my life should have meaning. It's bad when 12 people could decide if you live or die. The thing is, these 12 people don't know the law. All they do is listen to the DA and go home, eat, and sleep, not knowing what they just done to a person that day. Anyway, I know everybody has their own cross to bear, but I won't mind it so much if I deserve this. I'm not a bad person. Every day is a challenge for me. I try hard to do the right things here. Sometimes I don't want to do right because of the way I feel some days. But I think about what what would it change? Nothing. I would still be here wasting time. I feel like I could have been anything I wanted to be if I had my mind in the right places. I'm really tired of prison. I would like to be free once more before I die. I'm closer to death than life right now. I'm almost 60 years old. Do you think God still has a plan for my life? Maybe he do, but I don't like this part of his plan. Love you, Brother Bobby.
Deborah Pratt, author of the book of Greed and Glory in Pursuit of Freedom for All. Thank you so much for being here on the show today.
You're welcome, Janice. Thank you for having me. And my brother, thank you on his behalf.
Yes, speak his name
Bobby Darren Plant,
and speak your dad's name,
Alfred Plant Sr.,
your mom,
Eloise Porter Plant,
and anyone else you want to name.
Olawale Kosala, Zora Neale Hurston, Joy Harris, Tracy Sherrod. I could go on, but yes.
Thank you.
Janice Adams. How about that? I speak your name. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to stop the tape. And I'm not sure. I don't want to. Oh, there we are. I do not want